In marketing, everything must work seamlessly, or efficiency, speed, and ROI all suffer. That's why Quad is obsessed with making sure your marketing machine runs smoothly, with less friction and smarter integration. Better marketing is built on Quad. See how better gets done at www.quad.com/buildbetter. Hit talk to our experts and get help today. Hey gang, it's Thursday, July 3rd. Jacob, Grace, and listeners, welcome to Behind the Numbers, an eMarketer video podcast made possible by Quad. Joining me today, we have two analysts, both living in California, both covering AI and technology for us. One writes our long-form content, that's Jacob Bourne. Welcome, fella.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, sir. And the other writes our short-form stuff. It's Grace Harmon. Hello.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here.
Yes, indeed. Today's fact. Does it matter if you drink from a wider or narrower drinking glass? Do you guys have a preference?
Wow, I've never considered that question before.
Yeah.
Ever. Not once in my life. I mean, if you're an infant, you want narrow, right? But it kind of widens as you grow up.
Oh, okay.
See, I was going to say narrow.
Fair logic.
I was going to say narrow.
Grace is like, I need a funnel. Apparently, it does matter. According to a recent study by Nathalie Spielman and Patricia Rossi, they published this study in the Journal of Business Research. I think it was last year. And they found that people prefer apart from Grace, wide-rimmed drinking glasses to narrow-rimmed ones. So red wine glasses versus champagne flutes would be one example. A write-up of the study by Lisa Ward of the Wall Street Journal notes that folks are not only prepared to spend more on beverages in wider glasses, but they are also more likely to reorder more expensive drinks that are served in a wider glass. And also drinking from wider glasses makes people feel better.
Okay, maybe I changed my mind then.
Yeah, but the champagne flute forces you to sip. I think that's the point of that, right? Sometimes maybe you don't want to be drinking things very quickly.
Yeah.
Depending
Wait, so if
on
you
what
had champagne in a wider rimmed glass, you would down it?
Well,
I'd have
I
the
don't know
option,
about down
Marcus.
it, but certainly I think it would go down quicker, than something narrow. Yeah.
I just think they're easier to drink out of, aren't they?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's kind of
Because if it's narrow, it kind of rushes at you, doesn't it, Grace?
I feel like I'm less likely to spill with a narrow glass.
Well, that's the whole. Yeah, that's true too.
Trying to get my order in the sippy cup.
Yeah.
That's where I live. Not really. That's crazy. But sometimes I do think it would be better. It's kind of like Velcro. Sometimes I wish Velcro was more socially acceptable as an adult. People have told me it is, but I disagree. Anyway, today's real topic: how AGI will change our lives, and when the hell is it actually going to get here? So on Monday, we talked about how to define artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And then we discussed how smart AI is already when compared to people. As I mentioned, today we're going to talk about how it's going to change our lives. How much do AI companies need to ask society what they want from AI, and when it might get here. Jacob, let's start with what area of our lives we kind of came to the general consensus, if you will, that it is human level intelligence is kind of what we were discussing as in terms of what AGI actually means. What area of our lives will AGI change the most, do you think?
Yeah, I think the most, and probably the most, or one of two of the most immediate, is going to be the workplace.
Okay. How so?
Well, people exchange their intelligence and capabilities to work in exchange for money. And if you have an AI that is as intelligent and as capable as a person, then that's of course going to shift the entire paradigm of work, the meaning of work. It could be that it just represents a shift of roles. People maybe might kind of adopt roles that are just more based on human interaction and human relationships,
Hmm. Yeah.
while AI does all the grunt work.
Is there a tipping point in terms of, okay, there's this, these are the things that I do as a person, and what's that threshold of once AI starts doing X number of things that I
Yeah.
become more obsolete, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, I
Could
think,
it ever do enough to make humans? Because you just mentioned, a lot of it's going to be emotional intelligence,
hmm
like
hmm.
empathy, how well you can motivate people, and so will AI ever
Well,
replace?
and I think AI can do some of those things too. I mean, certain tests
Mm,
show that AI can be more empathetic than people. Not all tests show that, but some do. But I
hmm.
think that there might be just a desire to have people in certain roles just because they're people.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, so I think the question is, will we be seeing a shift in roles, or will we see people just shifting to universal basic income and not working anymore? I think that's a basic question,
Hmm.
a fundamental question about this. If AI really gets this general intelligence, but still requires a lot of human supervision, well, then those will be the roles. People will
Hmm.
just be AI supervisors.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it really depends on the level of autonomy. How much can you trust AI to do certain things without human supervision?
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the questions that I think will show us
Okay.
whether it's going to be just people not working at all or just a shift in roles.
So the workplace, Grace, how about you? What area do you think AGI is going to influence the most?
Well, I think most immediately, like Jacob was saying, there's still a pretty big amount of human oversight needed. I think one of the big effects we're seeing on the workforce right now is reductions in workforce to make way for AI spending.
Mhm.
So kind of in preparation for that AI innovation for AI initiatives is these really big cuts just to
Hmm.
reduce employee costs.
Yeah.
I was thinking in terms of the top two. To a degree, I mean, scientific discovery for sure, but work in the economy. We're already seeing a lot of wealth concentrated at these big AI companies, these big tech firms that are kind of in a way becoming like the banks of today. And it affords them a lot of legal sway and a lot of economic power.
Mm.
So that's what I was thinking about outside of the labor market. But I mean, that is just the big one. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Jacob hit on
Yeah.
a lot of the big important points there.
Yeah, and to add to what Grace said about already seeing cuts to make way for AI spending, I mean, there's also been some regret on that front.
Mhm.
Some
Yeah.
AI layoffs, firms are like, well, AI is not quite there. We wish we had those people back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was Klarna that had to roll back
Hmm.
AI and
Yeah.
customer service, and I do think, that was because the customer experience went down. And there's two
Hmm.
things there that I would guess, which is one, that the AI wasn't doing a good enough job, but also people just don't really want to engage with that, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of this and a big part of the future trajectory is that people might just want to interact with people
There is,
sometimes.
yeah, it was a weird assumption that I'm going to want to read stuff written by AI. And there was a really good quote. I think it was, I can't remember the article it was in, and it was from not the author, but they were citing, just a person, a member of the general public, as saying, why would I want to read something that someone hasn't taken the time to write?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that kind of gets to the heart of it for me is that, okay, yeah, there's something about the human experience, and there's a reason that we like talking to other humans. We like to experience art or music or whatever it is from other humans. And so I think that has been, and whether it comes to customer
Yeah.
service, we like,
Well,
getting help from
yeah.
other humans.
And, and that's really interesting, Mark. So just this morning, I was reading a study about how they found that people sometimes prefer AI written poetry if they don't know if it was written by an AI or human. But once
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
learn that it was written by an AI, then they kind of want to,
There we are.
they're like,
Yeah.
and don't like it as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
So there's
absolutely
a bias
true.
there.
There was an article by Charlie Wars of the Atlantic that I was reading, I think a year or so ago. In the first few paragraphs, you're reading it fine. And then you get to the fourth paragraph, and he's like, oh, by the way, the first three were written by AI. And
Hmm.
Hmm.
I felt some kind of way. I felt deceived, and I felt like I
Hmm.
couldn't relate to the article as much because it wasn't written by a human.
There's also just more distrust. That doesn't mean that, I don't have, or that no one has distrust in the flaws or the capabilities of a human journalist, but I think you then scrutinize what it's saying a lot
Yeah,
more.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think another part of it is when people are saying, I don't want to speak to humans, I would rather deal with AI or a machine, or what they're saying there is I'd like things to be a bit faster. I don't
Mhm.
like having to wait in line for 40 minutes of customer service with an airline. And if I can speak to an AI quicker, then I want that. But they might not want that. What they're saying to you is, I would like to speak to a person if it was really fast and if they could help me as efficiently as maybe an AI system
Hmm.
could.
Well,
Um,
there's also
Please.
some conflicts there where the most important thing I think for online shoppers is speed, but also the most important thing within the customer service experience is human connection, which
Mhm.
it's kind of contradictory, and that's not a bad thing, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jacob, what other areas do you expect AGI to really
Well,
make an impact?
this one's interesting based on what we were just talking about. I think the other area is actually personal relationships, which seems counterintuitive to what we were just saying, but companionship is a rising use case for chatbots,
Hmm.
as well as like mental health and life coaching and things like that. Um, and I think it's a rising use case, and it probably is just a subset of the population that feels comfortable using AI in that way. But I think from the beginning, after ChatGPT launched and we saw these open source models, be on the rise, there were sort of companionship dedicated platforms that came about that were very popular. But now we're seeing that people are using, ChatGPT for those kind of use cases as well, especially in the advent of voice mode,
Hmm.
which makes it a
Yes.
bit more personal.
Hmm.
So I think with the advent of an AGI that's going to be able to understand the nuance of human emotion and social situations even more. I think, and then of course, pairing AGI with like robotics, I think we're going to see a
Hmm.
huge, we're going to see sweeping changes in terms of people really turning to machines for companionship.
Yeah. Grace, is there another way that you think AGI is going to change things significantly?
I think another key area is going to be scientific discovery. So, creating cures for diseases, designing clean energy systems, things like that. If the AGI is able to autonomously make hypotheses, design experiments, but that also plays again into the future of work. I think right now we talk a lot about how software developers, coders are really vulnerable to AI and to job loss, but that also brings in an entire other industry within medicine scientists. But that is a level of AGI that would have to be far more advanced than customer service capabilities. But I
Hmm.
think far down the line, it is something that could be a big benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Far down the line.
I think scientific breakthroughs is a really good one, and one that might not get the level of pushback or concern as other areas that AI is disrupting. And the Nobel Prize in chemistry last year went to some folks who are working on the protein structure
Hmm. Hmm.
problem, and solved that, which people have been trying to solve for 50 odd years. So we're already seeing it influence in medicine, whether it's looking at, whether it's this or whether looking through scans to check for cancer that the human eye might not be able to spot. It's definitely, I think that's a really, really good way that it's going to make an impact in our lives. It's going to make it feels inevitable that it has made an impact and it's going to make even more of an impact in our lives. And it feels different from other technologies in a sense, that, I mean, Sigal Samuel of Vox was writing a piece titled AI companies are trying to build God. Shouldn't they get our permission first? The public did not consent to artificial general intelligence. And so the question here is, how much permission do AI developers need to get from society before irrevocably changing society with AGI? Grace, when I first read that, I was thinking, well, no one asked for the iPhone, no one asked for Facebook, and they profoundly changed our worlds. But then the more I read the article, Miss Samuel makes some very convincing arguments as to, no, this is bigger than that. This is more important than that. And actually, speaking to the public, maybe even having a referendum on it, which has been done in the UK. We had a referendum on ranked choice voting. Do we want to change how our voting worked? We had a referendum on Brexit. Do we want to just ask the public what they felt about being in or out of the European Union. So we have in the past stopped and said, hang on, big decisions, we should ask the general population what they think. What did you make of this idea of getting permission to develop AI before taking it even further?
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument in the article that stuck out to me the most was that the simple fact of using AI means that you're giving consent to what the
Yes.
companies are doing.
Our
And,
use is our consent. Exactly.
yeah, and I mean, you could say the same thing about using Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, that your use of the platform, equates. And it does, by the user policies, equate to consent to data scraping and sometimes a lack of user privacy. I'd say, I mean, in my opinion, consent to use shouldn't mean an agreement that all, that you approve of or are okay with everything that a company is doing. I also think that there is
Good
a lot
point.
of pressure from employers and then just curiosity and interest that's driving use rather than a huge interest in having the tech be a big part of your personal professional life. So there is kind of the thing of if you used it lightly or if you are being told to use it, does that mean that you automatically get factored into being okay with everything that the companies are doing? I guess I would say that the control that we have now in terms of permission is kind of like you were saying, more as voters being able to push lawmakers to set up government framework, things like that, because
Mm-hmm.
the ship has sailed otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
consent part's really interesting. That jumped out to me as well. Consent versus informed consent, where we fully understand the associated risks. You could argue that it rarely is informed consent, and maybe that's the responsibility of the individual to be more informed. Maybe it's the responsibility of the companies to help explain what the thing is in the
Yeah.
first place. But Miss Sammy was saying sometimes we consent to technology because we fear, as you were saying, Grace, we fear will be at a professional disadvantage if we don't use it. So, if you're a journalist and you're using social media, did you really consent to it, or are you doing it because you have to? If you're at a company and companies saying we need to use AI and you're using it because you're nervous about falling behind professionally, are you really consenting to use it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the stakes are just so high with AGI. I mean, we talked about the sweeping changes to the workforce and, to personal relationships. Of course, scientific advancement is positive, generally speaking, but I think you can achieve that same type of advancement with powerful narrow models, not general models. Um, and I think with AGI, there's also concern among the people building this technology themselves who say it actually poses an existential risk to humanity. We don't exactly know what this thing is going to do once we build it. Current testing of existing models shows that even when powerful AI models are aligned with human values, if they have a certain objective, they're willing to lie and deceive in order to achieve that objective. And
Yes.
so if you have a model that's as or more intelligent than a person, that becomes pretty worrying. So I think that, I think there should be a strong level of public support needed to proceed with AGI. And I think this issue is really looming large right now because you have legislation proposed, by the Trump administration to block the ability of states to regulate AI for 10 years, which puts us at 2035. Now, the ban, it would be
Mm.
the current wording of the bill says, well, it would be either that or lose federal funding.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, at the state level, that's the way that public support gets communicated into hopefully sensible regulation. And if states lose the ability to do that, then I think that kind of kneecaps, the sort of permission-based AI development
Hmm.
that's in question here.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I think it's a little bit different in the EU, but I do think in the US that ship has sailed in terms of being able to rein things in. I
Hmm.
think even the threat of losing federal funding, which to some states isn't enough to, follow some of the policies being put into place by the administration. I think that in terms of being able to have any control over what these companies are doing, what they're developing, for the most part, that it's over. That ship has sailed.
Do you think that that could be influenced from the international community? Because one of the things that was pointed out in this article was that we have a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. We have a biological weapons convention. Like we have treaties, difficult to implement, not perfect, but they are there to keep people across the world safe. And there are a lot of different. Miss Sammy was saying that there's the idea we can't stop technological innovation. We're too far gone. Like it's going to happen. We stopped, but she points out we stopped trying to clone people, and we decided you can't put nuclear weapons in space. And so, do you think there could be pressure from outside the US for the UN or for some body internationally to put some rules in place to say, hey, actually, are there certain kinds of AI that shouldn't exist? I think was a good question in the piece. Like, do you think that that's possible?
I think it's possible, but I think a problem with that is so with nuclear weapons, we know what they do.
Mm.
We don't have an AGI yet. And so
It's a
we
great point.
there's thoughts about what it could do and concern about what it could do, but we haven't seen this thing in action. And so I think it's really hard to pass legislation about something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that we don't know exactly what the consequences are. I also think that within some of the legislation that's been proposed, like the California AI bill that was shot down,
Mhm.
what you're testing for in terms of capabilities, we still don't know. I think part of it was testing for if you could use AI to create a nuclear biological weapon. And it's, does that mean being able to give instructions to a human? Does that mean being able to do its own coding and work with,
Mhm.
we don't really know exactly what to test for because
Hmm.
like you said, we don't know what it's capable of. We don't know the
Mhm.
consequences.
The stakes do seem higher here, Jacob, as you said. I thought it was an interesting uh, line in the piece from Jack Clark, one of the co-founders of the AI company Anthropic, and he had told Vox that it's really weird that this is not a government project. And this is
Mhm.
someone who founded a private AI company, but because of how significant this is, that it is in the hands of private firms. And to your point, you have to wait for the thing to be built before you can regulate it. But if you wait for it to be
Yeah.
built, maybe it's too late.
Yeah. And I think this is a big difference between the US and China too, where you see the
Mm,
Chinese government has much closer ties to its private tech sector and much more control over it.
mhm.
And of course, they're pushing for AGI as well. In the US, historically, the tech industry has had very loose ties with the federal government, but I think we're seeing that maybe slowly change, probably because of AI. We are seeing more partnerships between tech and the government, and certainly a lot of lobbying going on.
Yeah. All right, so let's end with this. When will AGI arrive? Will we have some form of AGI before 2030? Cade Metz of the New York Times was writing, and what we learned on Monday's episode is that identifying AGI is essentially a matter of opinion. So this
Hmm.
is both, I think, a very interesting question, but also maybe a bit of a silly one because how will you know when it's here? But based on how you would both define AGI, Jacob, when does it get here? When does some form of
Yeah.
AGI arrive?
Yeah, I mean, based on the simpler definition, and also it could just be the kind of thing where we never really reach a definition, but we know it when we see it, kind of thing.
Mm,
Mhm.
I would say that something that we could call AGI is going to arrive by 2030. And I say that because if you just look at the giant leaps that we've already made, I mean, AI first was invented back in 1960, and it was kind of a slow pace of development for many decades. And then 2022, you see ChatGPT, you see this enormous leap in capabilities. And I think over the past few years, we have seen that increase. But not only have we seen an increase, we've seen just a huge amount of global investment and enthusiasm in AI advancement. And I think that any kind of roadblocks in terms of a lack of data quality or limitations with chips or model architecture, I think the amount of investment is going to blow past those limitations, and we're going to see this
mm.
kind of powerful AI arrive in the next few years.
Yeah, Grace, where do you land?
I had just the same idea of about 5 to 7 years. I'd also posit that
Okay.
the other definition for some companies has been financially based. I think with Microsoft and OpenAI, it was if AI can generate $100 billion in profits, which is complicated. Sam Altman said that the company's losing money on pro subscriptions because it costs so much to use and people are using it more than expected. So I guess from a financial point, it's a balancing act. I think it'll take at least 5 years for companies to find the balance between the cost of a powerful AI model and getting profits back from it. But in terms of, the vague, nebulous definition of what AGI is, I agree with Jacob.
Yeah. Yeah. OpenAI had said, we talked about this on Monday, that it's a highly autonomous system that outperforms humans at most economically valuable work. So again, focusing on the dollars and cents side of things. The arrival date for AGI, I think one thing everyone can agree on is that it varies radically based on who you ask. And I went and looked and see, okay, what do people think? If you picked any year in the future, someone will agree with you. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei thinks powerful AI, that's his phrase for AGI, might arrive as early as next year, 2026. Google's co-founder Sergey Brin and Google's DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis thinks AGI will arrive sometime around 2030. So they are in agreement with both of you. There was a recent analysis from Kem Dilmajani, principal analyst at I think this is AIM Multiple. Or AI Multiple could be research combing through close to 9,000 AGI predictions from scientists, AI experts, and entrepreneurs between 2009 and 2023. They averaged the data and found there's a 50% probability we will reach human level intelligence in machines from 2040 to 2061. However, McKinsey, they wrote that most researchers and academics believe we are decades away from realizing AGI. Even there are a few even predict we won't see AGI this century or ever. Rodney Brooks, a roboticist at MIT and co-founder of the company iRobot, thinks AGI won't arrive until the year 2300. So hundreds of years away.
If we can't ever agree on the definition, then I suppose we will never see it, right? But,
everyone could be right. Exactly. We're all right, we're all wrong.
One more thing on this outlook is just that this whole 2030 prediction, it's kind of also in line with when some people think we're going to see the first quantum computer that can outperform classical computers on practical tasks arrive. Okay. And there's a close relationship between AI and quantum computing in that one can sort of speed up the development of the other. And so that could be one reason why we're seeing this 2030 date thrown around, is because AI could push quantum computing forward, and also it would be a sort of symbiotic relationship, or vice versa. Yeah. But I think if both were to be achieved within 5 years, we would see enormous changes from that.
Yeah.
We shall see. Thank you so much to my guests for hanging out with me today. That's all we have time for. Thank you first to Jacob.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, indeed. And then to Grace.
Great talking to you guys.
And thank you to the whole editing crew, and to everyone for listening in to Behind the Numbers, an eMarketer video podcast made possible by Quad. Make sure you subscribe and follow and leave a rating and review if you have time. We'll be back on Monday. To our American listeners / viewers, happy 4th of July weekends.